Welcome to the Wild Nova podcast. I'm your host, Janine O'Brien. Join me as we explore holistic health for your body, mind, and spirit through inspiring interviews with experts and seekers. It's all about a balanced and fulfilling life. So let's dive in. On this week's episode of the Wild Nova podcast, I am so excited and thrilled to be introducing Michael Van Soest. Michael is a registered clinical hypnotherapist who has been studying the healing arts of consciousness since the year 2010. With the use of hypnosis, he has overcome his own depression, anxiety, smoking, and drinking habits. Over the years, he has learned practical and logical tips and tools to reverse his severe emotional, mental, and physical health issues to have a more balanced and healthy lifestyle. So please join me in welcoming Michael Van Soest to the Wild Nova podcast. Awesome. Thank you so much. I have Michael here with me who is a hypnotherapist, and I'm just so excited to dive into all of the things with you today.
Yeah, thank you. It's great being here and happy to be on the show.
Yeah. So I'm going to keep it nice and simple. Start with the same question I start with everybody. What were you like as a kid?
That's a great question. I'm sure everyone's perspective is a little bit different. However, from what I remember, I was quite quiet. I didn't really say too much as a kid. I was quite introverted. And I would say when everything was okay, I was very quiet. When something was not always okay, I was quiet. But then when something was terrible, then I would say something. and my parents got to know that pretty good. So when I said something, it's like, okay, we got to pay attention. So, yeah. But for the most part, otherwise, I was really shy. But then when I got to know somebody and I was comfortable around them, I was a little bit of a crazy kid.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting because, yeah, now you're talking in front of people. You are more social and stuff from what I can see, like online and everything. Like you have courses, you have all of this, and that's awesome.
Yeah, it was quite a shift. I've definitely done enough inner work to the point where I felt like I completed the introvertedness. It's kind of weird to say, but it was just at a certain point I was like, I feel really good about myself. I feel confident. I feel just really comfortable with being in my own body. And it was a point where I just decided to go out and about and start being a little bit more extroverted.
I get that. I even when I started the podcast and everything, like part of the reason that I put it off for so long was because I was afraid to put myself out there. So it was like healing that part of myself that realized that what I have to share and what I can give to other people is more important than me being kind of uncomfortable from time to time.
Yeah, that really is the key of confidence. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've done a few public speaking gigs before, and I was actually in Toastmasters in the Okanagan for a good year. I think almost a year and a half, and uh, I was always nervous going up, but then it was always to do with me focusing on what people would think about what I'm going to say. But then when I shifted my mindset to, hey, I have some valuable information, it doesn't matter what people think
Yeah.
about me, it's about the information. So I just focus on the information. Next thing you know, all that lack of confidence went away. And all of a sudden I stepped into this extreme confidence of just sharing the information and not caring.
Yeah, and especially in situations like that, it's trying to remember that the people that are there listening to you are kind of in the same shoes as you, and they don't want you to fail. Like, they're not wanting you to fail. They're trying to support you and strengthen you. And you're just like, oh God, they're going to hate me. And it's like, no, it's fine. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've been doing hypnotherapy now for how many years?
I've started, well, that's a two-part answer.
Yes.
I began my research back in 2010,
Mhm.
and then I've been doing hypnotherapy professionally since 2018.
Wow. So, what made you actually look into hypnotherapy in 2010 when it was, I guess I would say, a little less popular?
Yeah, well, I honestly didn't really know that it was hypnotherapy that I was primarily focused on. I really began my research on consciousness itself. I didn't really, I mean, I heard the term subconscious, here and there. But overall, again, it wasn't really talked about a lot. It was more so conscious practices, spiritual practices, meditation, that kind of thing. And yeah, it was just my own health issues that came into acknowledgement, and I realized that I needed to start figuring something out. So I eventually got into spiritual practices that led me, down the conscious route and understanding, what what consciousness was essentially, and then that led me more into the subconscious realms, and
Mhm.
eventually, I got into clinical hypnotherapy.
Yeah, I find honestly a lot of the healers and stuff that I talk to and people that are in this type of industry, they get into it because honestly, they were kind of fucked up to begin with. It's like we have our shit, like the really good ones. It's like, yeah, I'm really good at dealing with like trauma and grief. I'm like, because I've lived a lot of trauma and grief. And it's like you understand it on that subconscious level. So it's almost like you can tap into the energy of it a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah, you really hit the nail on the head with that one. For me, especially, I was, yeah, the reason why I was so quiet when I was younger is because I was quite freaked out about life. I was quite retracted so to speak, and when I became, a little bit more older, my early teenage years, mid teenage years. I didn't really know what it was, but I was actually quite anxious and depressed.
Yeah.
And then when I was in my early 20s, I realized, like, holy shit, like
Yeah.
I'm crazily, depressed. I even had thoughts of suicide at a
Yep.
certain point in my life, actually multiple times.
Yeah.
And, the anxiety was quite chronic, to the point where my organs were starting to malfunction, and I was in and out of the doctor's office and even the hospital at one point. So it was yeah, it's quite a crazy time to have to go through, and even just not even realizing what it is at first. There's no terminology or anything
Yeah.
for it yet. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I when I started like when I had my big trauma moment and then like started more into this path, then I realized that like through my early 20s and my teen years and stuff, I still had trauma. I just had no idea. And it's like, "Oh, you were in survival mode that whole time." Like no wonder you have no idea who you are. Like this is just it's intense and yeah, I know that God, the things you get into when you're in that state, like my teen years and stuff, it was heavily, heavily drugs, alcohol, so much depression, anxiety, and everything. And it was like just pure lost.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly, what happens.
Yeah.
I could relate. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I remember there was a certain point in my early 20s where it's just like I have no idea what sober feels like.
Yeah.
It was like bouncing from one thing to the next, whether it was alcohol, marijuana, magic mushrooms,
Yeah.
or any other chemical based drug. It felt like I was cycling through it. And, even when I was working, I had a difficult time holding a job, and I was always like self medicating. I just can't even imagine, of going back in that time frame in my own mind where I am today, and like, what was I doing? I couldn't imagine
Yeah.
myself doing that because it just makes no sense where I am right now. But way back, it's like, oh my God, that was some crazy times, and
Yeah.
yeah, so it's
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually funny. Like the people that knew me back then and the people that know me now, like if they swap stories of who I am, they'd be like, we're talking about two totally different people. Like, yes. And I'm proud of that.
nice,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's just been such a massive transformation. I think for humanity in
Yeah.
general, the last 10, 15, 20 years even, and I could definitely relate
Yeah.
in multiple ways. I'm
I
sure.
I have loved seeing like not just in the spiritual community, but in all communities, how people are actually like not drinking anymore and it's becoming more popular. And it's like I was an alcoholic teenager. I quit drinking around like 18, 19 because I had to. And it was like I really have only had a couple drinks since, and it's amazing now, like everybody else wants to kind of be sober too, and I'm like, oh, I'm not alone anymore, this is awesome. Like,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's even I love to have lots of excitement in my life,
yeah.
and I usually have multiple careers, and it's kind of interesting because like I do hypnotherapy. I did it full time for multiple years, and I realized, okay, there's like too much sitting and too much dealing with other people's issues, and
Yeah.
sometimes I need to kind of just like do something else to kind of rebalance myself. So way back in the past, I did electrical in the trades full time. And
Nice.
so now I'm kind of like, I love hypnotherapy. I do it majority of the time, but then I also will do electrical once in a while because I built my name up in that whole industry and people know me really well. I could run job sites, I could run,
Yeah.
manage a whole crew of people. And it's really neat because it's like, okay, I could see where I was in that world. And sometimes I'll even come across some people that are remind me of my younger self in that whole industry and field.
Yeah.
And then seeing, where I am right now with hypnotherapy, it's like I have one foot in each world. And it's kind of cool because I could
Yeah.
help people out in that sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like the alcoholism and the drugs and marijuana, that's just so I guess it's so extreme in certain cases in
Yeah.
people's lives. So it's just pretty neat. Like even for myself, I found like a good balance of it all. I mean, I've quit marijuana for a long,
Mhm.
long, long time ago. Alcohol, I quit for a while, then I went back to it for a little bit, then I quit again, then I went back, then I quit. And I mean, right now I don't drink at all because it just doesn't serve me.
Yeah.
But it's just super neat to kind of like see, how I could balance it because I know a lot of people would just like walk away from that lifestyle completely
Yeah.
and just not even want to do anything with it. And yeah, so it's pretty neat, being in two
Yeah.
worlds at the same time. But yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, it's really nice when you can find that balance because like I can still be around people drinking and doing drugs and all of that, and it's like it's fine because I've been sober for so long. And it's like even when I did start trying to drink again, then I had a big traumatic event happen and I realized I'm like because of the past problems I had, I do not want to touch alcohol right now because I know if I touch it, it's going to be an escape, not something I'm doing because I kind of enjoy it from time to time. It was like, this could be dangerous for me. So let's just not tempt that monster right now.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. My
sometimes yeah,
rule was
have to.
always like, if I feel like I need it or I'm wanting it, then I'm not allowed to touch it. And if I feel like, oh yeah, sure, like I could have a sip or I could have a drink and I don't really care, I'm like, then it's fine. Then you can have a drink. Then you can smoke a joint. Like something, it's okay. Just as long as you're not having that craving for it,
Yeah,
then you need to watch
that's
why.
that's a great rule. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So would you say like has hypnotherapy kind of helped people around you with any of the drinking, drugs, anything like that? Do people come to you for that at all?
Yeah, they definitely do. They come to me for all different cases.
Mm.
But yeah, there's lots of excitement around, helping people quit things like alcohol or even marijuana. And marijuana is a really interesting one because it's not the actual chemical compound of the herbal medicine marijuana. It's not actually addicting, but people come in with all types of mental addictions to it,
Yeah.
and that's where hypnotherapy really helps, and because the reason why we have that attachment is all subconscious related. Our beliefs, our definitions, how and why we have the habit itself. What reward are we getting from the habit, so to
Yeah.
speak, and why do we feel that we need to have a reward? What are we rewarding ourselves from? It's super fascinating, and same with alcohol. Alcohol is a little bit more of it can be a little bit more of an intense one, just because a lot of people can depend on it way more intensively than marijuana. But all of it really comes down to beliefs, definitions, and the reward mechanism, the benefits of it. Yeah, so it's been really fascinating working with people in that sense.
Yeah, I find the brain and subconscious like so interesting. Like I'm a very analytical person. I love knowing and learning things, and I love finding ways to like trick my own brain. So it's like I smoked for God, probably like 16 years straight, was at least a pack a day. And I had the rule when I started, every time people would bug me, like, oh, you need to quit smoking, you need to quit smoking. I'm like, I have a rule. I'll either quit when I'm 30 or I'll quit when I'm trying to get pregnant, like a year before I want to try and get pregnant. And I'm like, that is when
Nice.
I'm quitting. And I quit before my 30th birthday. And the day I decided to quit, it was like in September or something. And I like was sitting there with my last smoke in the pack and I'm like, yeah, I'm done. And I just put it down. I had my last smoke and I'm like, okay. I'm like, I set very clear, again, rules with myself to make my brain work as like, okay, you can't buy smokes and you can't ask anybody for smokes. If I found one randomly in the bottom of my purse, it was fair game, it was mine, and I was going to smoke it. So it's like, I still to
Nice.
this day will randomly look in an old purse, like, is there a smoke in here? I'm like, no. I'm like, damn it. I'm like, I can't have one. So it's like, it's worked so far because I'm like, I just had to make sure I'm like, go nowhere that I could buy smokes for at least a couple weeks and just make sure I didn't ask anybody and I'm fine.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty good rule. Yeah, sometimes we have to create those rules and those games with ourselves. Yeah, and it's kind of funny. I never really got into smoking cigarettes
Mm.
full on. I mean, the odd time I'd have the odd one, but I was more into cigars. So, I came
Oh,
from a family
so good.
background where my dad's side, my dad and my grandpa on my dad's side, they're both hardcore smokers. Like they started when they were 12.
Yeah.
Another one was 14, and they smoked every single day of their life. And to this day, I think, yeah, my dad's still smoking. My grandpa, he passed away, or my opa, I guess.
Yeah.
But he smoked from the time when he was young all the way till he died. And I remember my dad was telling me, if I ever catch you smoking, I'm gonna, like knock you out, or he was being serious in a way, but he was like
Yeah.
for real because there was a lot of pain that came with that all. Later on, I found out that it wasn't so much, just the habit; it was all the emotional traumas and the
Yeah.
emotional background that was there. And as a kid, I just absorbed everything. So,
Yeah.
sure enough, yeah, I didn't never started smoking cigarettes, but I got heavy into smoking cigars. Like I was smoking packs of cigars a day, and those are
I,
like way
yeah.
worse.
I know. I, for a good year, was on the Captain Black sweets when you could get them in the pack. Oh,
Okay.
so good. I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like, those were literally candy. I was like, this is horrible.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Prime times way back in the day. I think that's where I started. Prime times, and then Blackstone cherries, and
Yeah.
yeah, it was crazy. Yeah,
And
but
now I guess you can't really buy them anymore. I think someone said you
I
can't
guess
even get
not.
like menthol cigarettes. And I'm like, what? It's like they're flavored things you can't get. And I'm like, weird. Like I'm so old that, to my brain, you can still get flavored cigars and marijuana is still illegal. Like,
Yeah. In certain cases, yeah, it's
yeah,
super odd.
yeah, yeah. So okay, one of the questions that I really wanted to ask you was like, what is the difference between like if I was to do a guided meditation and to do hypnotherapy for something?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Honestly, it's the same state of mind. So hypnotherapy or even meditation, it usually ranges in the theta brainwave state. And so typically when we go into meditation, an early set of meditation would be more alpha brainwave state. And then eventually when we go into the deeper levels of meditation, we go into the theta brainwave state.
Mm.
And same principles with hypnotherapy, except with hypnotherapy, it's more the induction. And so it's more getting into the state of the theta brainwave state. There's a whole lot more science around hypnotherapy to do with how one can access that brainwave state and also sustain it in a really effective way. And so that's essentially the only major difference. But hypnosis in terms, hypnotherapy. I mean, hypnosis is just, I guess, another word of a way of saying trance, a
Yep.
trance like state. And so, hypnosis came from I believe it was James Braid back in the late 1800s. He coined the term hypnos or hypnosis. And he actually took the name from the Greek god of sleep name, Hypnos.
Mm.
And so that's where the word actually came from. But when I actually researched a little bit more about James Braid and a little bit more of his background, a lot of his teachers or his mentors were highly spiritual. And so he was basically trained by highly spiritual practitioners how to navigate and manage that state of mind. And then, yeah, he came up with the term hypnos. He brought it through the medical industry quite in a very compartmentalized, tight construct, just so it could be. I don't like to use the word say like control, but in a sense, way back then, if it
Yeah.
got too out of proportion, it would be woo woo,
Yeah.
and people were crucified for doing
Yes.
anything like that. So
It like allowed it to go safely into the mainstream where people could
yeah.
still like feel more comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he coined the term hypnosis, turned it into a form of therapy, and it
Mhm.
was very compact, and it safely went through the medical industry, the scientific industry, and essentially, that's where we are today. And when you kind of take the word hypnosis out of the question, it's more of just trance therapy. And so, yeah, that's essentially the only major difference. It's just the navigation and the scientifical approach. I like using that word, scientifical. I don't know why. I'm making up a word today.
I like it. I enjoy it. Uh, so I know you do a bunch of your sessions and stuff online with people. I was always concerned myself because I have like severe like PTSD and trauma and stuff in the past. Would you suggest somebody like me do it more in person so that there can be more of a control, or is it still safe for somebody with like heavy amounts of trauma to do hypnotherapy online?
It's still safe to do it online. I would say the main primary aspect is the education going into it. And so, like, all hypnosis is self hypnosis, just like meditation. All meditation is self meditation.
Mhm.
You could go into a guided meditation, but in the end, that person in the state of meditation is the one meditating.
Yeah.
And so, same with hypnosis, it's a very similar aspect to that. And so, even with someone with severe PTSD,
Mhm.
what happens is when a person goes into that state of mind, let's say, for example, the internet connection went off, and all of a sudden, hey, a person's online, they're in that state of mind and can't get back on. The hypnotist is basically, I don't know what to do. But essentially, it's all about the pre-talk. It's all about education going into it. And basically, if the hypnotherapist is doing a really good job, then they'll basically give all the major key points of what to do in that state. And even when a person has severe trauma, essentially, the best thing I usually do is educate them and empower them in every single way possible. And how I typically do that is, PTSD is really kind of a unique approach when working with hypnotherapy, because what happens is when a person's working through the traumas, and actually getting into the roots of it, a person can never fully, truly re-experience everything. It's, the event is over, so to speak. And so when a person goes back into that memory or that trauma, and all of a sudden it's, that the awareness is going through the whole subconscious realm of where that trauma is stored, all of a sudden there may be this fear, and there's like, oh my God, all this stuff is starting to come up. And the main thing to realize is just that, the worst is already over. The event is already over, and a person has full control in that state. And so it's not so much the hypnotherapist that is, so to speak, controlling the hypnotist session or the hypnosis session. It's more about the actual client is the one controlling themselves. And it's a really key point, because a client going through severe trauma, when they go into that realm, they could basically, if I'm doing my job correctly, I could say, okay, it's just like a movie screen. You could pause, you could rewind, you could fast forward, you could even block things out if you really wanted to. And so you kind of give them the remote control, so to speak. And so even if a person's, in that state, power goes off, connection is disrupted, the client now has all the tools that they need, and they could safely say, okay, hey, I don't see the hypnotherapist anywhere, here I am in this craziness, and I'm just going to pause it. And they could pause it and just take their time and just staring at a frozen screen in their mind and just observing it. And sometimes that alone is enough to begin for them to feel a little more comfortable with it, to realize, hey, this has already happened. I don't have to go through this again. And eventually they'll just come out of that state of hypnosis on their own. And so it's actually quite a safe approach. I mean, in person is always a little bit more of a dynamic, just because I could kind of like tell, I'm quite a sensitive human being, my intuition, I've developed it over the years. And so I could typically kind of sense what a person's going through. But even online, as long as I have a video, and they're on screen, I could usually tell by their facial expressions. I could get different cues of like, oh, okay, this is where they're kind of going into a little bit more emotion now, and this is where they're having like a realization. And typically, like 99% of the time, I'm pretty spot on. So, did that answer your question?
Yeah, completely. And I'm one of those people that like, oh God, after all of the trauma and stuff, I don't hold back tears on anything. So it's like, it's really easy to tell when I'm going through the shit, because I'm like, there's just tears coming down. I'm like, I'm just letting it go. Like anyone working on me is like, you want tissue? I'm like, no, my skin will absorb it. It's fine. Like, just let them go. Like, that's comforting though, because I kind of avoided some hypnosis and stuff before, because that was a concern of mine, especially during COVID when everything was online. And I was like, okay, but like, it wasn't like, can I get stuck in this? It was like, if I have a full blown panic attack, can I get out of that kind of thing? Like, can we stop me before I go into full panic mode kind of thing? Which, yeah, your brain is a very powerful thing. It's amazing.
Like, it is. Yeah. And there's just more and more scientific studies that I come across of how powerful the mind is. Like, I was reading a long time ago that a person, if they go in too much fear, like extreme fear, they could actually like kill themselves.
Oh, I believe it.
Just their mind will completely shut down, and their whole body will just off.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't believe I just read that, and it's extreme fear. Yeah, if a person convinces themselves that they're in extreme danger and there's extreme fear, they could literally just leave their soul will just leave their body, and it's like, okay, it's just kind of like blacking out, but they don't come back.
Yeah. God, it's honestly just seeing what my mind has like put me through even in the last few years and stuff. I'm like, man, when I first started coming out of the PTSD and like starting the actual spiritual journey and stuff, I had a moment and everybody kept trying to be like super supportive and I don't think really understand what I was trying to say, but I was like, it is my fault that I have PTSD. Like, I'm not blaming what happened to me on myself in any way, but I'm like, it's my brain that is causing this to happen right now. It's not outside anything, because it can be something like just a noise beside me that triggers me. And it's like, it's my brain doing this, nothing else. Like, I'm not in danger. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, with that, you have the contrast, right? Our mind is so extremely powerful that people can have spontaneous miracle healings.
Yeah.
I remember coming across this book. It was called The Science of Miracles, or
Mm.
something about miracles, anyways. And it was essentially that, is people that go into faith healers, and they'll start to work with faith healers, and they're just ready, and
Yeah.
and they believe so much that all of a sudden they're going to heal this crippling disease that they've had most of their life,
Yeah.
and sure enough, they'll completely heal it. And it's like, okay, well, what happened there? You just
Yeah.
healed something. There's no scientific evidence that anything happened except your mind believed it.
Yeah. It's even like, because I do Reiki and stuff, it's knowing that my work can only do so much if you're ready for it. It's like your body needs to be able to release it. Your energy needs to be able to work with me. And so it's like each time I'll have people come back every month sometimes, and it's like we can work on so many different layers, and they're like, wow, I'm seeing massive improvements. I'm like, because you were ready to let go of it. Like, you can bring it back and that tension back to you if you want to, but like, are you ready to let go of it? And is it ready to like stay gone? Because that's when you'll see the
Yeah.
most improvement.
Yeah, and that's essentially, why I feel like I've really accelerated in hypnotherapy, because I mean, just going through my own stuff has taught me, what it takes. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just about, doing a simple session. It's really about understanding, okay, well, why was I creating the anxiety or the depression in the first place? Where did it come from? Where did I pick it up from?
Yeah.
When I was born, so to speak, let's just say I'm not spiritual, and I'm, quite atheist. If I was born, then essentially I'd be a clean slate. I would have no thoughts whatsoever. I wouldn't have any knowing of reality. And so if I started neutral, just in pure love, unconditional love, then what happened when all of a sudden I started to realize, oh my God, there's all these fearful things, and I have all this anxiety. Where did it come from?
Yeah.
And that's kind of really what it's about, is understanding, well, where within the subconscious is this being generated? And that's essentially where hypnotherapy comes in, because it could safely navigate someone to those root core beliefs, or those definitions of, understanding that, hey, somewhere along the line, somebody told you this about the world, and they gave you proof or validation, not saying it was true,
Yeah.
because truth is subjective.
Yeah.
But they said this thing, they have this validation. They say, look, it's real. This is what I experienced. And all of a sudden, oh, it must be real. And next thing you know, a belief, an idea turns into a belief, because the more validation we get on an idea, it just builds momentum to the point where all of a sudden we start to manifest that idea or that, that validation into our own life that we experience. And so and then all of a sudden it is real, and now we have this belief. And so every time we go out into the world and we experience this, then all of a sudden, we're creating this emotional reaction to it.
Yeah.
And so hypnotherapy really helps to really get into those roots and say, okay, well, where did it come from? And before you picked it up, what were you thinking of? And that's really the true gem. And I wouldn't say secret, but that's like one of the main key components is understanding where it originated from, and then going just before that. And when a person realizes that just before that, it wasn't even in the mind, it wasn't even conceived of. It was, you were just like, it's kind of like the idea of a word. What is a really cool word? Kalura, or something like that. If I say kalura, most people have no idea what it is. But what if I said it means you are the most beautiful thing ever?
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden we have this comprehension. Oh, kalura means beautiful. Oh, it's so amazing. But what if I said kalura is actually really annoying and a trickster?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like that. It's like this interesting idea that before this crazy, anxiety idea is I guess seeded or planted in the subconscious, before that we don't have any comprehension of what that is. And so the power of the mind, how you could go from not knowing anything to introducing an idea, and then all of a sudden defining that idea, giving it a strong definition and meaning, and all of a sudden it has power over you. Like that's quite, it's incredible. And it could build momentum over years and years and years, to the point where all of a sudden it's controlling somebody's life to the point where they don't feel comfortable in their skin, and they need to go to drugs or alcohol.
Yeah.
So momentum is powerful. It really comes down to momentum and knowing where it all comes from.
And again, it's those subconscious thoughts that like we don't even realize are controlling like so much of our lives, where you're like, this is just who I am. And it's like, no, it's that repetitive, like you said, like somebody shows you something. So if you have 5 men show you the exact same thing, you're like, all men are like this. And it's like, no, but now you're going to attract all the men like that because your brain is like pulling it towards you. And it's really interesting to see. It's like, okay, try to heal some of that and change your thinking, like to this is just this way in this circumstance. It can be different.
Yeah. And manifestation, there's no such thing as law of unmanifestation. We're always manifesting all the time. So if we have a category of wealth in our subconscious, so let's say we have multiple categories, the full 360 category, finances, career, it could be emotional life, it could be intellectual life, it could be everything we know about, basically everything, the full 360 degree of what our life is, how we've been downloaded from our parents, from school, from society. And so like once we learn within a category like wealth or money, for example, when we learn like the original or the initiator, so to speak, the person or the information that is initiated first into our subconscious is typically what will rule the subconscious later on, because it has the primary seeding, you can say, where it can grasp, like once our subconscious usually is introduced with an idea, initiated with an idea, then it starts to work on its own. It's essentially, it will like once, if we are in a state of confusion, let's say, we're learning about abundance for the very first time, or money, and there's all these terms that are thrown at us, but we don't really know what those terms mean yet. We may still be learning about the language around that whole sphere of money. And so we have a lot of confusion in the mind still, because there's a lot of gaps. When we're learning something new, it's like there's tons of gaps. We're trying to pick up little pieces and trying to build a whole story out of it. And so when we're in a state of confusion, typically the mind does not like to be in confusion. The subconscious does not like to be in confusion. And so it will try to do its very best to not be in confusion, because when the mind is in a state of confusion, it's using up way more brain power trying to figure it out, because there's all these loose ends. And so when we're using up all this extra energy trying to figure things out, essentially we're using up our reserves for our survival instincts. And so we do not like to use up our reserves. Our whole subconscious is trying to keep us safe. And so we're always trying to be in that safe mode, that rest digest mode. And so when we have confusion, our mind is just like, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I manifest situations and circumstances to build the whole picture faster, sooner? Yep. And it constructs a lot quicker in our mind at that point. And then from there, it just keeps building momentum. And so it's really fascinating to know that, once we get the whole story, just because it's there doesn't mean it cannot be undone. It just means, it may take a little bit of time to realize how you constructed the story, where all those pieces came from. And basically, you're just deconstructing everything to like the bare bones or the basics. And then once you're at the basics again, now you have all the building blocks, and you could reconstruct things differently in a more empowered way that serves you better. And that's just, it's so beautiful to see people go through that type of transformation.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you start becoming more aware of things in your life, where it was like for a really long time, I was overwhelmed, like all the time. And it was causing me to like have that point in my life where I just wouldn't do anything because I was so overwhelmed. I'm like, sometimes I still do it, and sometimes it's healthy, sometimes it's not. So then it's like, I realized I was putting off so much stuff until the last minute in my life. And I was like, okay, I'm doing this on purpose. I know I'm doing this on purpose, but I don't know why. And then it was like, I was almost like addicted to the overwhelm and the stress. And it was like, it made me feel almost important to be able to do so much in a day. And it was like, oh, I got all of this done. I'm amazing. And it's like, dude, you could have done all of that so much easier, so much faster a long time ago, and not stressed about everything for like weeks. Like, just stop putting it off. So it's like, dealing with like getting over that addiction to overwhelm, and like taking those steps every day to make sure I'm like keeping on top of everything and not putting too much on my plate that doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's I could definitely say the same. I've definitely been in that edge of overwhelm, and it's pretty neat, because way back when I was depressed, I didn't want to really do anything. I didn't want to go to work. I didn't want to live my own life. I was like lazy in that sense. I was just trying to put things off and just sleep longer. I was like, hey, I want to go to sleep for like 12 hours just because I have to wake up and do this life thing that I didn't really enjoy. And then all of a sudden I got to this point where, I just ended up doing the inner work that I needed to do. And then it was like, whoa, I love life. Like, I need to do more. And so I started to like get so excited about all these things. And I just kept filling my day full, to the point where I had so many things that I was like developing: skills, careers, businesses, fun hobbies, all these things. And then I was like, okay, my schedule is completely full and I still want to do more. What do I do? And so I started cutting back my sleep. I was like, I don't need to sleep as much. I'm just going to sleep 5 hours a day. And this is going to be great. And so I started doing that. And next thing you know, I'm getting burnt out.
Yeah.
And all these things are happening. I'm like,
Yeah.
I can't even focus totally. And I'm just like, I got to do more. And so, yeah, it's kind of interesting, that whole idea of like overwhelm and, just
Yeah.
my own energy, my own relationship to it. It's kind of hysterically funny.
I had a doctor like last year ask me like, "Oh, do you have any hobbies?" And I'm like, "Yeah. Yeah, I do." Like I'm just learning about this, like maybe I have ADHD or something, cuz I'm like the amount of crafts and hobbies I have started around the house right now are ridiculous. I'm like, if you need any crafting project, I'm like, I have done woodworking, I have done painting, I have done like everything. And I'm like, yeah,
Nice.
I love it. Like, uh,
Yeah.
uh,
So what was like the tipping point for you to like all of a sudden go into that phase and that mode of wanting to do so much?
oh, I don't know. I love doing stuff all of the time. Like, I just always need to make sure, because I've gone through so much over the last few years, that I'm like, I want to push and push and push myself all the time to like go and spend time with my friends and go and do like events, because we have like so many cool things going on like in Kelowna and stuff now, and it's like, especially when it's summertime, I love it. And I love doing the hobbies and I love getting out there. And I love putting so much into like the podcast and my business and stuff. And it's remembering to take those rest moments is so important, because I'm like, otherwise nobody hears from me for a week. I am on the couch and it's like I have burned myself out again. I was like, I did it again. Like, I have no control some days.
It happens, and it's good to identify it all, right?
Yeah.
Identify what's taking place, what's going on, and yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's finding that balance where it's like, okay, looking at my calendar, I'm like, okay, I have everything booked. I have one day this week where I'm just going to do whatever I want. Not what I need to do
Nice.
around the house or with my friends or anything like that. It's like, what do I actually want to do that day? And friends has been like a big thing that I've put energy towards in the last few years, because in this journey, like I said, all the people that I used to hang out with, I don't really have contact with anymore. So I had nobody to hang out with, no friends to just talk with or anything. So for the last few years, I've really made an effort in that, because it was something that was important to me, and it was massive. Like, it's helped me a lot to like see that I'm not alone. And it's like I do have support there when I need it. I just have to ask. And they give me a hard time about not asking when I actually need it. But I'm getting better. Uh,
Awesome.
yeah. Yeah, it's just been awesome over the last few years. But so do you still do like hypnotherapy stuff on yourself even?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, it's really evolved for me over the years. I just became so adapted to working with my subconscious that I can detect even the subtle bits of, knowing when something is surfacing, or when I ask myself a question, uh, I could detect even the subtle subconscious answer.
Mm.
And so I've really kind of adapted to learn how I could do the subconscious work without even really needing to go into that space. And I've actually harmonized my consciousness with my subconscious quite a lot, to the point that even during the day, like I could detect when there is some subconscious exchange of energies between me and maybe someone else. It could be like a coworker. It could be someone that I'm meeting, where all of a sudden it's like, whoa, okay, I need to stay away from them. They got some energy that I really don't want.
Yeah.
Or I could detect even sometimes where my intuition is just like dialed in, and it's like I could know kind of what they're going to say next, or what they're, going to be sharing. And so I kind of am, really adapted to myself that way, where I could just really go in and understand, okay, well, what am I experiencing right now? What is the message behind it? Where did it start from? What can I learn from this? How can I take empowerment from this? And it's like it's all, the subconscious is all emotional based. So whenever I ask a question to my subconscious, it really comes up as an emotional response. And it's up to me to kind of tune my mind into translating that emotion. And so it's kind of like with the language that I grew up with, the English language and all the terminology and definitions, etc. I have that kind of, hardwired into my brain at this point. And so when I feel energy, like an emotional energy that my subconscious is responding with, it's up to me to tune into that energy and then begin to translate it the best way I possibly can. And that may come in words. It could be a certain words that all of a sudden my mind will populate. It could even be a message, like visions or images that come into my mind. It could even just be, I'll just sit with the emotion, and all of a sudden it'll just be a knowing, where all of a sudden I just fully know it. And so, yeah, I'm always doing subconscious work in that fashion. And I usually will do it right before going to bed, because that's usually where my mind naturally wants to rest anyways. And so, yeah, I'm always doing some type of inner work. And I basically, if you were to meet me 20 years ago, I would probably be a completely different person to where I am today. And I've been able to reverse all my major health issues, actually all of my health issues, and of free from drugs and alcohol, even caffeine. Like completely sober. I got addicted to being sober. Like I was doing cleanses, and I got into such in-depth cleansing that I actually started feeling high. Because my pineal gland was fully activated. All of a sudden, like it was like, wow, like I feel so lucid. My body was so clean, and it felt super freaking good. And to the point where I had so much excitement to be alive, so much love for myself. And it's kind of like at a point right now, I'm just like, well, how much further can I go with this? And so I'm actually going as far as I can, that whole idea of enlightenment or whatever it is, lightening up on oneself. I keep going with it. And I'm actually starting a gratitude challenge coming up here. I'm saying 100,000 thank yous in 100 days. I have these like really cool tally counter clickers. I'm just going far with it, because there's just so much that I love to work with, this whole sphere of hypnosis and trance therapy. It's amazing.
I think like one of the really important things that you pointed out was that when you drop into it, you feel it first. And it's like knowing that you're feeling it. Because there are times where I go to tap in and I can feel it up in my head. And I'm like, no, okay, drop into my body. Now look for the answer. And to strengthen that, I found the biggest missing piece that I had for years was trust. Like, I have to trust myself. And I have to trust that sometimes the things I say to my clients sound absolutely batshit crazy. And I get that. And it still is kind of awkward sometimes for me, because I'm like, I don't know how to tell you this without, because like you came for Reiki, but I do more than Reiki because everything's different. Like things come up in sessions that I'm like, so we were clearing this, and like this and this and this came up, and they're like, how the hell did you know that? I'm like, I wish I knew. Like it happens. Like it just is a part of it. But the biggest part was trusting it, and trusting that sometimes it's very clear that I'll be shown something and I'm like, is this to be cleared right now? Yeah, okay. Do I need to let them know it's being cleared? Sometimes it's a yes and sometimes it's a no. And it's like, if it's a no, I'm like, I honor the fact that I don't need to come off to my clients like I know everything or I'm tapping into this to prove to them that I'm doing my job sometimes. It's like, I need to trust that it's not the right time for this to be brought up right now. And we'll move past that. And it's, yeah, again, that trust and the feeling that you get is so strong sometimes. It's amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, that's the thing is we are all highly sensitive instruments. Our body is this biological instrument, you could say.
Yeah.
We have an ability, like everybody has an ability to be intuitive. And some people are like, what do you mean? I'm not intuitive. I can't be intuitive. And then I often will ask, well, have you ever had the time where you were thinking of someone and then all of a sudden they call you? And it's like, okay, well, what was that? Was that intuition that person was also thinking about you and they're about to
Yeah.
call you? Or was it a manifestation, and it could be both.
Yeah.
But there's just so many situations, and even, the course that I offer and what I teach, it's
Mm-hmm.
really about helping people to tune in and harmonize their conscious mind with their subconscious and really begin to develop their instrument of being.
Yeah.
And this is just such a powerful way for them to really tune their body, tune their mind and their subconscious to the point where they could do their own inner work super quickly, but then also know how to understand the world that they're working with,
Yeah.
and knowing how to really interact with it in the most empowering way possible, but the most
Yeah.
harmonious way possible as well.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that happened even just last year, I had like a couple surgeries and it was really funny. There was like a newer doctor. I could tell he was pretty young, pretty new what he was doing. Like, and he was doing an ultrasound. And at one point, he was like trying to find my kidney. And he's like, oh, we'll go back to that one, but I'll check the other one. And I'm like, it's right here. And I pointed to it. And he like he's like, wait a minute, where did you point? I'm like, right here. And he's like, how do you know where your kidney is? I'm like, I can feel it. I'm like, is that not normal? And he's like, no. And I'm like, oh. Like, I didn't realize. I'm like, you asked me where my kidney is, so I checked in with my body and I'm like, oh, it's right over here. Like,
Nice.
I just thought people could do that. Like, this poor doctor just looked at me so shocked. It's like, oh, okay. I'm like, yeah, it's a blessing and a curse to be really like in tune. I'm like, that one's fine right now. Like, yeah, yeah, it saved my life actually twice last year being so connected to my body and knowing what was going on. Like, yeah,
Awesome.
it was amazing, but also frustrating when you're like telling doctors things and they're like, oh, you're just overreacting. You're just stressing out. Don't worry about it. And I'm like, okay, but could we check? Like,
Yeah. Yeah,
please?
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so many health issues can be reversed
Yep.
if they're caught early.
Yeah.
The Western medical community and that whole realm, so to speak, is highly beneficial. But I feel like it's it's more so it's geared for people that haven't been able to catch things early,
Yep.
right? Like going into the idea of surgeries and
Yeah.
everything else, and catching things on the farther end of it. Where I feel like a lot of other cultures, even like Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicines, they really focus on the precursors, or
Yep.
like the early set of any illness, and just knowing, being able to tune into your body. I don't know how many times where if I were to have known of how to tune into myself when I was a lot younger, I could have probably kept myself from, going in and out of the hospital multiple times, and
Yeah.
it's just crazy that we're not really taught that in school. We're not taught how to tune into ourselves. Even in families, most families have no idea about these things. It's like
Yeah.
we're operating this body, we are this
Yeah.
body, but we don't even know the anatomy of it and know how
Oh,
to,
yeah.
it's just so crazy to me sometimes. And so, yeah, I'm really dedicated to learn more about the conscious side. And yeah, one thing I will share briefly is I
Yeah.
always found it fascinating that, just the idea of consciousness and how um, when we pass away, when we die or something, when our soul leaves our body, how fast the body begins to decompose. It's quite extraordinary,
It's
and
amazing.
it just kind of brought so much light into my awareness to know that the consciousness or the soul does have an electromagnetic play with the body,
Yeah.
and I'm just thinking, even from the time we're born all the
Yeah.
way up until where we are, like we always are changing and morphing and adapting, and so there is a lot of play with our consciousness and how it aligns everything. And so, yeah, it's just like an illness. Okay, well, where did the illness begin? Usually it will begin in the mind, because our mind will then tell our body or electromagnetically align our bodies to start operating differently. And then our body gets sick, and physical
It
ailments.
was
So, yeah,
super
it's neat.
interesting, actually, like on those lines. So when I was doing, like, I did my crystal healing masters and all of that, and one of the books, like, the reason I chose the program I did was because she was a scientist. She came at it from a science background, and that meant something to me because I love knowing why. Like that, I was that kid that would ask why, and if somebody got mad at me for because they didn't know the answer, it just is, well, then I would put up a fight. So, one of the books that they had us read was a lot about medical stuff. And one of the things in it, it was really interesting because scientists were doing studies on like your meridian lines and everything, and like your chi lines, all this. And they found that they're like, well, there's no purpose for it. Like, there's these channels in your body, there's no purpose, there's no reason for them scientifically. But what they did was they like cut off access to somebody's like liver or something like that from everything else was connected except for that channel line. And literally the liver started like dying. And they're like, this doesn't make sense. Like, everything else is functioning. It was totally fine before, but we just blocked like where your meridian line would be to your liver. Like, this is odd. And it's like, when things like that, when somebody says, oh, there's no science behind this, well, there's science to prove that something's going on there. Like, we just can't
Right.
prove
Yeah.
why because we don't know what questions to ask yet. That's why there is no answers for this or studies behind it. It's like we're not smart enough to know the question yet. Like,
Yeah, it's quite fascinating. Yeah, you really bring up
mm,
a very incredible point. Yeah. I remember reading this book when I was, getting into a little bit of, yeah, meridians and
mm-hmm.
Chinese medicine. And I was reading that by the time the average human being reaches adulthood in the Western world, 5 of 8 essential meridian channels have already closed down.
Oh, geez.
and
Oh,
and it just really opened my eyes to know that, okay, well, what are we doing, like, and that really goes towards the idea that I remember reading lots of different scriptures and learning about it, and that our human body could live up to like 900 years or something like that. It was I think it is, yeah, there's some stuff from the Bible as well as different scriptures, and yeah, like 900 years was totally doable. And even to this day, like I've gotten quite far into different internal arts, along
mm-hmm.
with subconscious therapy and different meditations, and understanding how far we can stretch the human body. And I come across people that they're not so much in the public, but I've heard of stories of people living 200, 300, five
Yeah.
hundred years, and in quite a common way. And I'm like, okay, well, and it really, all their teachings and or the hint of teachings goes down to understanding thyself, know thyself, knowing the meridians, knowing the energy, becoming very sensitive with yourself, understanding all the energies that are flowing in your body. And, just that, I wonder what would happen if all of our meridian channels were fully open by the time we reach adulthood. I wonder if we could sustain ourselves for like an extra 200 years, 300 years.
That would be so
Probably.
Cool. Yeah. I don't know. Part of me goes back and forth where part of me would want to live that long and the other part's like, do I? Like, I don't know. It just depends on how this, like, the world's been pretty messed up lately. I'm like, do I want to be around for another, like, 400 years? Ooh. I'd be like, yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely asked myself that, yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, even there's times where, like, when you're on this, like, journey of spirituality and stuff, and it's like, all these things and you're so aware, like almost hyper vigilant about yourself and the things around you and all of the energies. And it's like, sometimes I just want a day off. Like, I just want to go back to like dumb Janine for just one day. Just one day. I want to like drink my Red Bull or like 5 and just not feel horrible about it. Like,
awesome.
Yeah. Just, all of the things. It would be so great. I even, actually, one of the things that came up last year that was really funny, that I found really funny, I was having health issues on and off last year quite a bit. And one of them, I went to my naturopath and she's like, wow, your blood pressure is severely low. Like, you are about to pass out right now. Like, and I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. And she's like, okay. So we went over some things. I'm like, of course. Like, my lifestyle is literally like no salt, no this. I meditate, I do yoga, I do all of these things that people tell you to do to lower your blood pressure. Is just my day. So I was like, crap.
Interesting.
Like,
wow.
Yeah. So I was like, now I just need to eat a cheeseburger from time to time. And I'm like, okay, I'm good.
Hey, it's not a bad thing. That's
No. In my mind, it's a doctor prescribed cheeseburger. I don't mind.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, that heavy sodium. Because even when I would have burgers before, it was like just straight meat. Like, I wouldn't add a whole bunch of seasonings or spices. Like, I don't like a lot of salt in things. But she's like, you need more salt. I'm like, crap.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Huh. Yeah, it's real. Yeah, doing all these practices, you get totally relaxed. Yeah, it's quite fascinating.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, just seeing again the difference in people, like when they start in this journey or they come for their first session, like even just how drastically their lives can change in just a couple sessions is amazing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Reiki is it's quite exceptional. I feel like it's a little bit underrated. Um, but like when I first got into it way back in 2012, 2013,
Yeah.
it was really woo woo. It was like this out there thing. People thought you're crazy, and it's
my
like
dad was a Reiki master in the early 90s, so yeah, I get it.
wow.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
it
come
was
a
that
long
like
ways.
super woo woo, like, what do you mean? Like, what is Reiki? I'm like, you still get the question of like, what is Reiki? But now it is, I don't know, it's all of a sudden over the last few years, like more people know about it and it's more accepted. It's amazing. Like, I partially wish I was in the UK because we have family over there and they were saying like a lot of the time psychiatrists will like combined Reiki with psychiatry. And so it's like they'll go for like trauma therapy and then they'll go for Reiki, and those two practitioners will have discussions and talk and work together for the client. And I'm like, that's amazing. Like, let's do more of that here. Yeah.
Wow.
So
all right.
with your clients and stuff, like, how often would you say somebody should come and do hypnotherapy?
When I was first starting out, there was quite a strong momentum component. So I would say, once a week, and for about 6 sessions. And then typically a lot of issues would be reversed and become manageable. And I could give them practices from there. But since I have really, I guess, improved my art and skill and really got more into the educational side, um, someone could come for one session and have a really big breakthrough, and that could be enough for them to work on, because I usually will give lots of practices afterwards. And so we'll do a session, they'll give a whole bunch of key points to what was taking place, and then I could give them a practice to do on their own. And then if they feel like it's going really well, amazing. If they feel like they need another session, then in a couple of weeks I could do another one. It really is dependent on the person. Some people have really heavy things they're dealing with, and so sometimes they may need 3 sessions right off the bat, but then all of a sudden they're doing amazing, and
Yeah.
they come back like in 2 months, 3 months for one more session, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so it's really dependent. Like I've had one person, he was, obviously I won't share any details and names, but, he was an alcoholic for most of his life. He went to see therapists and all these people. He spent thousands of dollars, and all he wanted to do was just quit alcohol and have like some drinks, a few times a year on special events. And that's all he wanted. And a couple of years went by, still had the same addiction, had the same everything. He came from one hypnotherapy session, and he walked out, and I was actually, it was a really kind of interesting setting, but he just like woke up out of the hypnosis, and he just like stormed out like, I know what I need to do. I'm like, okay. And so that was it. That was all I said. Is and so I followed up with him. He's like, "Oh, it's great! I quit alcohol. Everything's amazing." It's like, "Thank you so much." I'm like, "Okay, that's great. Happy to hear." And even 1 month after, he was happy. He quit, and his life was going well. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. Sometimes one is all it takes. Other times, So it's all dependent on a person, really, and what they're going through.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was on your site and stuff, and you even have you have the free kind of call, and then you also have your little freebie that you offer as well. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So the free call, it's for people that are a little bit more serious, that actually want to do one-on-one sessions. I offer discovery calls, just so you can get to know me a little bit. And then the freebie is kind of like an introductory to the more larger course that I offer. It's 10 modules. And so the freebie is basically like, it's difficult to really focus in on one thing, just because hypnotherapy and working with the subconscious is very comprehensible. It's very, it basically touches upon everything, but more so, like I really attempt to focus on personal limitations and self-sabotage, and also finding oneself's soul, so to speak. I mean, obviously the soul is a pretty big topic, but helping someone to really tap into themselves, to know what really allows them to feel alive and to thrive, right? And I really love that whole principle. And so the course is very much that. It's very it's 10 modules. It really goes really deeply in each module of how to really connect into oneself, deconstruct a whole bunch of beliefs and definitions that may not be serving them, and then reconstruct yourself from the inside out. And so the freebie, because people didn't really want to invest that much money for the bigger course, I created the freebie. And so it's basically 4 lessons, and it really just gives some really simple basic principles on how a person can really start to step into themselves, start to really step into how to heal themselves, how to begin to thrive forward without the major investment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And that kind of work is so important. And I like how it's kind of that open concept where you're like, we're trying to find what works best for you, not I know what works best for you. Like, yeah, it's like, oh, you need to thrive in your business or you need to thrive at your at-home stuff. It's like, no, just what actually fills you up. Like, let's find that thing and work on that. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I found. There's a lot of specialty type of courses out there. And,
Mm-hmm.
but it's difficult to be very specialized because someone with a lack of confidence, they may have a lack of confidence for something totally different compared to someone else.
Yeah.
So if I create a whole course based on how you could be confident, but then, it's missing a huge portion of the audience because there's a whole bunch of reasons why somebody's not confident, and so I really did my very best, and I feel like I really went really far with it of being generalized but also very in depth,
Yeah.
helping someone, because we're all a human body. Everyone listening to this that has the senses and is able to feel and be a body, be a human, we all have the same similar construct. And so, we may have different body types, but, we all have consciousness. We all have a subconscious. We all have beliefs. We all have definitions. We all have a way of communication with ourselves plus other people. And so I really get into the depth of that, the basics. And I have different formulas of how to ask questions for like a category. So some people may be working on wealth and finances. Some people may be working on their career. Some people may be working on depression or self-worth or imposter syndrome. Whatever it is, I've really been able to help them connect with themselves, go really in depth with themselves, and knowing how to navigate their subconscious. And that's essentially what I teach. And then from there, they could basically heal themselves. And what's more empowering than giving someone all the tools where all of a sudden they empower themselves fully and they don't have to come back to me. They're like, okay, I know everything I need to know. But when they have a community of like, okay, here's all the tools, you can do what you want, and then they empower themselves. But then, they come back into the community just because there's so many like-minded individuals that are empowering themselves. And it's just a really strong community to do so. So, yeah, I really focus on that.
They'll come back to you, but just as more of a like, hey, this is awesome. Like, let's either because they want to, not because they have to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Because I, way back in my healing, I never liked the idea of having to go back to something over and over again. Like medication is like, oh, you have to take this the rest of your life. Oh, that's great. How much is that going to be per month? It's and I have to rely on that. What if I can't get it in like 5 years? That's ridiculous.
And then what side effects does it have too? A lot of the time, it's just massive.
Yeah, so I've had clients where you solve one thing and then all of a sudden they call me and it's like, oh no, why are you calling me? Like you shouldn't be. No, I want to work on something else. Like, oh, that's great. All right.
Yeah, I know. I have like a monthly subscription set up for my clients and stuff if they want to, so they can get a discount. And honestly, when I first set it up, I had the concern of like, well, if I'm doing my job, like they shouldn't come to me every month for a minute. And then I was like, no, like just like me and everybody, you have so many different layers. It's like, we'll work on the physical, we'll work on the emotional, we work on your past trauma, we work on either sometimes there's an emergency that came up today kind of thing where it's like, I am going through this. And a lot of my sessions, I start with a discussion with people. I don't dive straight into Reiki, but I channel Reiki while we're having the discussion. And it's kind of like a mini therapy session. And it's like, it lets them unload because sometimes they'll be like, oh, yeah, no, I'm feeling pretty good today. And I'm like, okay, so let's check in with like this, this, and this. And then all of a sudden they're in tears and they're like, I didn't think that was going to happen. I'm like, that's why you're here. And that's why I'm here. It's okay.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just like letting everything come. And it's every single time we've unlocked a different layer of something that's come up. And it's like, nobody's locked into the subscription. So it's like, you can cancel whenever you want. Like, it's totally good. But it was amazing to see the transformation in people when they just take that like moment every month to have a check-in, to just have self-care.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's really important sometimes to get a different perspective, even from myself. I'll
Yeah.
sometimes go and see someone or, and not that I need it. I feel like I'm thriving quite a lot and doing really
Yeah.
good. But even for myself, you can't always see the forest through the trees, as per my background.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful saying that I've really stood by, because even sometimes with myself, it's like I can't see my own stuff when I'm in it. And
Yep.
so, sometimes I get perspectives from other people. Other times I might go on a psychedelic ceremony experience. And that gives me a totally different perspective. And so,
Yeah.
but then all of that really helps me grow even more, because now I'm kind of stepping out of my own psyche, or
Mhm.
expanding it to a point where it's like, oh, wow, okay, I know what to work on, and I know what I need to do to keep thriving. And
Yeah.
that's just what I do. And so, yeah, people, I'm just people that are always into personal development and personal growth. It's so wise and beneficial to sometimes go get a second perspective, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know. I look forward to it sometimes. Even like I go to my natural path all the time, and she's like, "Okay, so we need to work on this, this, and this." And I was like, "Yeah, I was concerned you were gonna say that." I was like, "I knew what you're gonna say." And she's like, "That's why you come here, is just so I can tell you everything you know." And I'm like, "I know, but it just sounds different coming from somebody else." Like, right? Like, yeah, I'm well aware. Uh, so,
That's great.
yeah, I was trying to think. I'm like, we've gone over pretty much everything. Is there anything else that we didn't really touch on that you wanted to talk about?
Um, it was just kind of a free flow conversation. I feel like, we did pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great because we touched on all of my questions, just like they all kind of flowed into each other. So I'm like, that's awesome.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I will add all of your links for all of your website things and your freebie link and all of that in the show notes. And then also to end with, I have a couple rapid fire questions that I ask everybody.
Sure. Yeah. Go for
They're
it.
my entertaining questions. So, would you rather watch a movie or read a book?
Read a book.
What is your favorite season of the year?
Ooh, fall,
Mm.
autumn,
Do you prefer sweet or savory?
savory,
And what's your favorite plant?
a fern.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Um, what is the best place you've ever been?
That is a challenging one. The best place I've ever been, I would say, blissed out, looking over a beautiful valley with, yeah, just a stunning elements. The lake
Mm.
and the sun shining, and some clouds with rain, and yeah, yeah, just all the elements. Yeah.
I love that even in your best place, there's a little rain. I'm like, that tells a little bit about you. That it's
Yeah,
like,
maybe a little bit far down the valley, and
yeah,
just,
yeah.
yeah, it's
Everybody's like,
nice.
I want pure sunshine and nice and warm, and you're like, yeah, a little rain is kind of nice. That's very
Yeah,
fitting.
yeah. Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
what is your favorite form of body movement?
Right now, I would say of body movement. I really love the idea of a healthy spine. So, I usually will do like spinal flexes kind of thing, of like kind of nice spinal rolls and waves. And yeah, I really like those types of movements. But I mean, dance is amazing too. I like
Yeah,
dance, but yeah.
that's awesome. What is your preferred way to manage stress and overwhelm?
Laying flat on the floor and being grateful.
That's perfect, actually. Huh.
Yeah, yeah.
What is your favorite type of music?
Uh, hmm. That's I really am in between classical music as well as electronic music.
A combo would be perfect, though.
Yeah,
Just like
yeah,
a
absolutely.
classical electronic.
Yeah.
Could be interesting.
I'd be into that. Yeah.
What is the best mythical creature?
Sasquatch.
Who said he's mythical? It's fine.
I guess, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Well, I even said, like, there's a few of my friends that came on and I'm like, yeah, mythical is kind of a loose term here. Because I'm like, with some people, they'll be like fairies and they are like, they're not mythical. Okay, we'll go with it.
Cool. Yeah.
What is one of your greatest accomplishments so far?
Greatest accomplishments. Oh my gosh, that is a challenging one. I would have to say launching my course. Yeah, that was one of the biggest accomplishments, just because it took so many years to just like build it and get feedback and know that people are receiving benefits. Like, it took me 3 years of like organically sharing and getting feedback, adjusting, sharing, getting feedback, adjusting. So I'd say that would probably be the biggest accomplishment.
Yeah, there's so much in the course and stuff. When I was looking at it, I'm like, that's amazing. Like, that definitely took you an insane amount of time. Amazing. That is the last of my questions. That's it.
Oh, okay. I was ready for the next one. Okay.
I know. I tried to keep it short.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on again. Like you said, you're working on Grateful. I'm very grateful to have you on.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely been a pleasure. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome.
You've been a great host.
Thanks. I try. I try not to go off the rails too often.
Hey, that's totally cool if you do sometimes. Yeah. Could have it wild.
Right. Awesome. All right. Bye.
Bye for now.
Once again, I would like to thank Michael Van Soest for joining me on this week's episode of the Wild Nova podcast. If you would like to hear more from him, please join him over on Instagram at conscious.harmonics, as well as his website, consciousharmonics.ca. If you found any resonance in today's discussion, don't forget to share, subscribe, and leave a review. Your engagement really means a lot to me. Connect with me on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram at the Wild Nova Podcast. If you have any questions or comments, you can email me at info@wildnova.ca. And as always, visit my website for any additional resources at wildnova.ca. I'm your host, Janine O'Brien. Remember, the connection between your body, mind, and spirit is a journey worth embracing. So until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.